Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and our mission is to bring you the real news each and every week. We release a lot of content. Some of that are in-depth news stories that the team and I work on for you guys. We also have our field messengers, which are kind of our boots on the ground all over the world that are sharing their perspectives of things happening in their community. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating a new Earth. And we have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency as far as what's really happening here on our planet in this battle of good versus evil that's literally taking place right before our eyes. If you want more information about who we are, you can visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. So this podcast is a week in review. As you can see, we release a lot of content, and I'd like to give you guys little snippets of the stories that you may want to check out and watch a little bit more in depth, right? So if you want to go back to any of the content that we've released, you know exactly where to go. It's also great if you want to share UNN with someone who's not already a member, because that, through memberships, that is how UNN makes money. We sell some of our own products and we have memberships for our content. Now, right now, the content is available exclusively to our members for the first week, and then we push it out to YouTube and Rumble. That may be changing in the near future. We'll see how things shake out, but that's the situation right now. So if you want instant access to all of our content, consider becoming a member. There's more information about that on our website. With any kind of content you guys are consuming, online, TV, radio, doesn't matter, be sure to think critically about the information that's being presented to you and ask questions. Perhaps do a little bit of research. Does what they're saying even make sense, right? Based on the information you have at the time. And even with our content, you know, it's good to question everything. And I can tell you, we're giving you everything as accurately as we possibly know it in that moment. But if something doesn't make sense, maybe just put it to the side and come back to it later. You know, a lot of the information, we've got a lot of good snippets today because Kim Gogan from the Global Intelligence Agency released a report. So we've got a lot of content, a lot of things you probably have never heard of before. And if it's just not ringing true for you right now, just put it to the side. Maybe it'll make sense later. I know when I first started hearing all these things that aren't released in mainstream media, I was like, what is going on here? It's like a whole other world. And that's kind of what it is when you find out you've been lied to about pretty much everything in your life. And now it's like you're having to learn everything all over again. But you still need to use your discernment because there are people out there that will try to lead you astray, ton of misinformation. And then when they do it on purpose, it's disinformation and it is everywhere. So use your cognitive abilities, question everything out there. And then when you figure some stuff out, share it with other people because that's how we're going to spread this information. This is how we're going to figure things out. This is how we're going to move forward more of a community type environment, right? Okay, no announcements today, so let's hop right to it. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. So our field messengers are the heart and soul of what United Network News is all about. These are average, everyday people. Well, they're amazing. When I say average, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, they haven't necessarily gone to journalism school. They haven't done all of the training, you know, of the typical news people you see. These are people that just care about their communities. And they want to share what's going on in their lives and their world with the whole planet. And we've got an incredible production team that helps put this content together, and then we put it out there for you guys on the news. So here are the stories that we released for this week, kicking things off in New Jersey for Arbor Day. So Arbor Day, that's a holiday in the U.S. It was first celebrated in 1872. And it honors the vital role of trees in our environment, which, you know, sometimes we don't really think about. It's like, oh, it's a tree. But trees are obviously super important. And a lot of people plant trees on Arbor Day. And so Amy went to the high school in her area because they were planting 2 cherry trees. One was promoted to encourage community and another one for environmental care. And she talked to a couple ladies that were part of the commission. I think it was called the Shade Tree Commission. And I think that's a statewide program. And their whole purpose is to ensure trees stay in the communities because, as development happens, sometimes you forget. But I thought it was interesting because it's called the Shade Tree Commission, not just the Tree Commission. But, providing shade, that's just one of many things, amazing things that trees do. And we need them, right? So I'm glad these groups exist. All right, Candace out of Minnesota tells us about a data center that has been proposed for her area. And as you can imagine, I don't know if you guys are seeing a lot of this stuff online where data centers are being proposed and residents are speaking up. And it's happening in Jasper County where Candace is. And they want to build this massive data center on farmland. And they've actually managed to convince some farmers to sell them land. So they've got a spot proposed, and the people that would be building it and perhaps even owning it, their name is Geronimo Power. And Candace says they are based out of Minnesota. And they had a hearing, not the Geronimo Power people, but the residents in the area had a hearing. And according to Candace, the state representative didn't even bother to invite anyone from Geronimo Power to be part of this discussion, which is a little shady, right? And so, they were willing to pay a lot of money for that farmland. And I guess the farmers, it was an offer they couldn't refuse. And that's kind of the land grab happening right now. Of course, Geronimo Power is now looking for tax breaks. And, if they're able to build this data center, a lot of people are concerned about that. There's water in the area that would be contaminated. Who knows what's going on in the air, and the quality of living in general goes down near data centers. So it's definitely something to be mindful of, not be scared of, because I actually don't think these are going to get very far. Our world is changing very, very fast, but we need to be cognitive of these things when they're happening and to speak up because we don't want these in our community. I don't think we're actually going to have a need for data centers in the very near future. But tell that to the people that think they're going to make buku bucks, right? So Candace, thank you for that report. That was a really good one. Rick out of Arizona shows us a group who is helping out military families. They're called the Military Support Foundation, and they are in Phoenix. And if you've seen any of Rick's stories before, you know that he does a lot to support the military. And I'm sure he has some sort of affiliation with them, whether he volunteers or whatever. But even if it's just raising awareness, this is a group that puts together care packages and resources to active duty military personnel and their families. So that's a whole other side of it, right? They even help them get groceries. They help them with presents around Christmas time. When it's time for the soldiers to come home, they even help them with these homecomings, right? So they've got like gifts and signs and, to welcome the soldiers home. And they said that they would really love to expand and at some point provide ready-to-eat frozen meals for the family, which I thought that was a great goal. All right, we had a just-in report, which is kind of what we're calling, it's not necessarily breaking news, but it's reports that we need to get out as quickly as possible because at one point the information was very timely and we want you guys to have access to this information as quickly as possible. So Owen out of South Africa talks about some flooding that happened in May. There was severe flooding along South Africa's Breed River, and it kind of turned life upside down for communities across the Western Cape. This affected farming regions, small towns. It burst the banks after heavy rains, inundating homes, roads, agricultural land. According to Owen, there were 10 fatalities reported, and the cleanup operations have begun, but it's kind of slow. But it's also nice to see communities coming together and supporting each other. Elsabe from New Zealand. Oh, this was a fun one, you guys. We called it Dog's Day Out. So there's an aqua center in New Plymouth, New Zealand, and it ends its season. So over there, it's summer. It's now just spring becoming summer here, but they're wrapping up their summer. And they had this special event at their pools where the local dogs could come and play in the pool. I mean, what else are you going to do? I'm assuming these are like kind of concrete bottom pools, right? So you don't have to worry about liners. things like that. I grew up, my parents have a pool, so I'm very familiar with all the things that can go wrong if dogs are scratching at your pool. But I think they have different pools there. It's more cement. But it was just so fun to see the dogs like jumping in the water and swimming over to the side, and just a fun way to wrap up the season, right? So that was great. Agwumba Obasi out of Nigeria shows us how they make cassava in his area. It is a staple food, and they export it as well. And so he takes us through the process, shows us how it's harvested, how they prepare it, and how they transform it into everyday essentials, such as bread and cakes. So it was very interesting to see how they do things over in Nigeria. Tanis out of Canada takes us to the Soaring Eagle Support Society. This is in her area, Northwest Alberta. And it is a safe haven for people dealing with housing challenges, trauma, and those who have limited support. So it was really interesting. She was able to speak to the executive director about their mission, their impact. The facility itself used to be a motel. I mean, what a great place, to turn into a safe haven for people that need a place to stay, right? And she also interviewed someone who's been personally impacted by this place and really got the support that he needed at an important time in his life. So that was really interesting to see too. Emma out of Spain shows us how to make sauerkraut, which is not as challenging as I thought it might be, although it does take place over several days. And you do have to keep checking it. You got to look for bubbles. You got to mix it up. And if you don't, it can turn pretty sour. So, hey, I learned something new. I'm actually not a sauerkraut fan. My husband loves it. Myself, not so much. I am German, but I guess I missed the boat on, I guess I'm supposed to like sauerkraut. I don't know, my heritage, but I missed that memo. And Steve M. out of Canada shows us how the weather is starting to change a little bit. He says they got 300% more snow than what was normal for his area in Northwest Alberta. So you got to be careful with that, right? Because if there's a lot of extra snow, as it melts, it could trigger rising water levels. There could be potential flooding. And so he's going to keep checking in on this. But so far, so good. So far, they haven't had any issues, but it's just now starting. And finally, Rosemary out of Australia takes us to the Three Creeks Farmers Market Co-op. This is in Gympie, Australia. And it's a community initiative supporting local growers and producers. I don't know what it is about going to these local events, but the people I find that are more in touch with nature and living a more natural lifestyle, they just have a different presence about them. It is so much more community-based and easier. I don't know a better word for it. Do you guys feel that way when you go to farmers market? It's like, oh, these are my people. And that's kind of what I felt like when I was watching this video. It's like, oh, they're just so lovely and they're nice and they're not freaking out about long lines and, oh, I got to be here, I got to do this. It was just, it is what it is. So this particular co-op was set up in 2023, and it was just a beautiful example of what happens when community members come together and support each other. So here are some of the stories that the team and I worked on for you guys this week, kicking things off in Australia. So Australia is overhauling its National Disability Insurance Scheme, or NDIS for short. It's an effort to control rising costs and make the program financially sustainable long term. The reforms will introduce standardized assessments focused on how disabilities affect daily life, tighter budget controls, stricter provider regulations, and new rules around who qualifies for support.
The government is cutting $35 billion from the NDIS, and it's not just a misallocation of funds that's the problem. Even if them finding $53 billion for missiles is a clear demonstration of their priorities. You see, the NDIS has never actually been about care. Instead, it's been a cash cow for private providers. When the government opened this new market, profits were huge because there was little competition, guaranteed public funding, and a massive demand. Between 2018 and 2024, participant numbers grew by 452%, and capital responded responded predictably with 269,000 private providers cashing in. But the more capital that piled in, the more it had to spend to stay in the game. Bigger offices, more admin, fighting over workers, which meant an increase in wages. Costs exploded, and the very thing that made it profitable disappeared.
While the government says the changes are needed to reduce fraud, improve consistency, and keep the system viable, critics warn that many disabled Australians, especially autistic people and those with psychosocial disabilities, could lose essential services and place greater caregiving pressure on families. Argentina is facing growing controversy after President Javier Milei backed reforms that weaken parts of the country's glacier protection law, giving provincial governments more power to decide which glacier areas can be open to mining and development. Supporters say the changes could attract major investment in copper, lithium, gold, and silver mining, while critics warn they could threaten vital glacier-fed water systems relied on by millions of people for drinking water, farming, and ecosystems.
The government argues that the glacier protection law blocked vital investment in the mining sector. Argentina currently exports around $6 billion of lithium, silver, and gold per year. It has proven copper reserves that have yet to be tapped and could triple export earnings in the next 6 years, according to the Argentine Chamber of Mining Companies.
The debate has intensified due to past environmental incidents, including cyanide spills at Valadero Mine, with activists arguing that weakening glacier protections could risk long-term water security across Argentina's dry Andean regions. America's aging sewer infrastructure is struggling to keep up with growing populations and more extreme weather, leading to massive sewage spills that pollute rivers, beaches, and communities with untreated waste, chemicals, and dangerous bacteria. Major incidents, including a reported 240 million gallon spill in the Potomac River and the ongoing Tijuana River sewage crisis affecting San Diego beaches, right here where I live, have highlighted the scale of the problem.
What would you do if you smelt rotten eggs and basically sludge throughout your house? In Southern California, in Tijuana, there's been basically more and more reports over the last 10 years around sewage making its way into the Tijuana River. And that has permeated into toxicity and is having direct effects on human health. In fact, this might be a product of not only corporations and pollution, but how we construct our cities and the amount of runoff and waste which we put into different waterways. Since 2018, more than 1 billion gallons of raw sewage with industrial chemicals has made its way into the Tijuana River and into the oceans through the river itself. And this kind of disaster is really difficult to manage and almost deal with, largely because we don't actually see the effects of dumping raw sewage within industrial chemicals into the river until years later. Since 2016, they've basically been looking at these problems, but really now, 2025, 2026, we're starting to see those effects really come through in the people, where there's obviously more headaches, nausea, shortness of breath, all these sorts of things. But then there's more and more reports of long-term health implications.
Experts warn that without major investments in modern pipes, treatment plants, and stormwater systems, sewage pollution could become even more common as cities expand and climate-driven flooding intensifies. Portugal launched its new National Deposit Return Scheme. It's called Volta, and it launched in April 2026 as part of a broader push to improve recycling rates and reduce plastic waste. This system adds a 10-cent deposit to eligible plastic bottles and drink cans, which consumers get back when they return containers through reverse vending machines installed across the country. Portugal introduced the program after falling far short of EU recycling targets, and supporters point to countries like Germany and Norway, where similar systems achieve collection rates above 90%. Advocates say deposit return schemes reduce litter, improve recycling quality, and help build a more circular economy, while most operational costs are simply covered by beverage producers under environmental responsibility rules. Nigeria continues to face a major electricity crisis despite having some of Africa's largest oil reserves, with more than 85 million people still lacking reliable water access and frequent blackouts affecting millions more. Although the country has more than 12,000 megawatts of installed capacity, actual electricity generation often falls far short of demand due to aging infrastructure, corruption, poor management, vandalism, and financial problems across the power sector.
Nigeria's grid is especially bad. It's never carried more than 6 gigawatts. The grid's job is to carry electricity from power plants to homes and businesses. But in Nigeria, the grid is still run by the government, and it just keeps collapsing. This shaky grid limits the amount of electricity that the government can buy from generator companies, and that then discourages them from making more electricity. This lack of grid power is making industrialization and the use of heavy machinery much harder. An inconsistent power supply also discourages foreign investment.
Rising electricity prices, unreliable estimated billing systems, and constant outages have left many households and businesses dependent on fuel generators, while critics argue that repeated government bailouts alone will not fix the deeper structural issues holding Nigeria's energy system back. San Francisco is experimenting with a new approach to coastal protection through its Living Seawall pilot project, which transforms parts of the city's concrete waterfront into habitat for marine life using specially designed textured tiles. Led by the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center and the Port of San Francisco, the project found that oysters, seaweed, crabs, mussels, and other organisms quickly began colonizing the surfaces, creating small, thriving ecosystems along the seawall.
So the idea behind the pilot project was to essentially determine whether you get a benefit to native species biodiversity if you add complexity to a seawall. So we were interested in seeing not only the effects of texture themselves, but does that vary with location around the city? On average, at each site, we've seen about 100 species. And we've seen juvenile crab species, barnacles, we've seen native oysters, which we're always excited to see, several beautiful red seaweeds that we're seeing. And that's just based on our visual surveys. So we're expecting with the additional work that we're doing in the lab, we are going to actually add to that number of species.
The effort is part of a broader engineering with nature movement that aims to design infrastructure that not only protects cities from flooding and erosion, but also supports biodiversity and healthier coastal ecosystems. A growing scam in the UK used car market known as ghost MOTs involve vehicles receiving official MOT pass certificates without undergoing proper safety inspections, raising concerns that dangerous cars are being allowed on the roads. The annual MOT test, regulated by the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, is meant to check critical systems like brakes, tires, lights, steering, and emissions, but fraudulent passes can hide serious faults from buyers and drivers.
Now, the danger is someone does this one year, they do it the next year, they do it the next year. Obviously, the state of a vehicle at the end of 12 months can be pretty bad. How many times have you gone for an MOT and needed a few £100 worth of welding, or you've needed new tyres, you've had to have your brakes replaced or something like that? Now, imagine that that's not picked up for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You could be driving around in an absolute death trap, things that could kill everyone in your vehicle, lead to a massive pile-up, could lead to multiple people having life-changing injuries or indeed life-ending injuries.
Authorities have prosecuted some garages and testers involved in this scam, while experts urge drivers to carefully review a vehicle's MOT history, watch for suspiciously perfect records, and use reputable garages to reduce the risk of fraud. Research is increasingly showing that creative activities like painting, music, journaling, and working with clay can have real mental and physical health benefits, helping reduce stress, improve mood, support emotional healing, and even aid physical rehabilitation. Creative arts therapy is now being used in hospitals and healthcare programs to support people dealing with conditions like anxiety, depression, PTSD, dementia, and Parkinson's disease. while studies suggest creative engagement may even help slow biological aging.
Did you know that art making is good for you? You might know this intuitively, but there's tons of science to back it up. In one study, people were hooked up to a machine that looked at their brain while they were engaging in art making activities. While they engaged in them, their medial prefrontal cortex was activated. And the medial prefrontal cortex is involved with emotional regulation, with self-reflection, and with executive functioning. So art making activates the part of the brain that helps you process and regulate emotions and gaze inward and maybe even make better decisions. Super cool. But there's also tons of research that shows that our cortisol levels drop after we engage in art making activities.
Experts say part of the benefit comes from entering a calm flow state where stress and mental overload quiet down. And they emphasize that artistic skill is not required. That's good news for people like me and my stick figures. Simply creating something regularly can help people feel more connected, emotionally balanced, and supported. And we know that because we're all creator beings. Ultra-processed foods, also known as UPFs, have become a major part of modern diets in places like the US, Canada, and the UK, driven by convenience, low cost, and heavy marketing. But growing research links them also to a range of health concerns. These industrial food products, often packed with additives and engineered for long shelf life, now make up a large share of daily calorie intake and grocery store offerings in many countries, with consumption especially high. Now, here's a soundbite. You're not going to believe it. Get this from the U.S. former FDA commissioner.
The United States has been exposed to something that our biology was never intended to handle. Energy-dense, highly palatable, rapidly absorbable, ultra-processed foods that have altered our metabolism and have resulted in the greatest increase in chronic disease in our history. Type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, hypertension, abnormal lipids, fatty liver, heart attacks, stroke, heart failure. From our food. From our food.
Experts say food companies optimize these products for what they call bliss points of sugar, salt, and fat that encourage overeating, while critics argue this has contributed to rising chronic disease and even legal action against major manufacturers. Now, the food industry, of course, they dispute these claims, but the debate continues over how much responsibility lies with companies versus individual choice and broader economic systems. Okay, let's check in with Kim Gogan. She is the head of the Global Intelligence Agency, and she did release a report, as I mentioned earlier. And I think this came out, I don't know, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 days ago. But very interesting information, guys. I have about 4 sound bites that I'm going to play. Now, if you recall, I think it was a couple months ago, Kim mentioned something called the Noncompete plan. And this was in regards to downlines for products. Remember, she was talking about how you as a consumer, you go to the store and you buy something. And let's say it's a product by Hershey. You are then in the downline of Hershey. And it's a game, right? It's a game with them because they're trying to get as many people in their downline, not just to give them money, although money is energy, but it's a control system. I mean, there is an energetic control to all of this. And that whole thing that she described a couple months ago is called the Noncompete plan. And it is a global plan. This is why there's so much marketing out there to get you to fall into these different downlines. Even for those of us who said, I don't want to be part of any of these companies, even on an energetic level, and I'm not going to buy anything from any of these companies. Well, unless you are making everything literally from scratch, you are still somehow associated with these companies. That's the frustrating thing. So here's the good news. They are no longer able to sustain and support these massive corporate networks worldwide. And this is happening right now. Here's Kim.
I want to revisit for a second the old non-compete plan. And I've talked about this before, and I talked about it before in great detail and where it came from and who created it. But this is the base root of what we are kind of seeing play out right now in stock markets, the global economic system. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to kind of leave this a little short because we have a lot to say today. The Noncompete plan was launched officially in 1975, but it had been building and in the making, so to speak, for at least a century before it was actually launched. And there's a lot of fear right now out there in the alt media and in mainstream media about, well, economic stability, cryptocurrency launching, the World Economic Forum and central bank digital currencies. And a lot of this is due to protectionism around the elite or by the elite. They're trying desperately right now to preserve an old dying system. And by system, I don't necessarily even mean AI systems or computer systems. I mean the system in which we exist. So at the base root of this non-compete plan, they don't really even understand all the inner workings because, quite frankly, these people were not high enough up in the food chain to really get all of the information that this was actually based on. So, in part, the non-compete plan was all about control. And this would actually be control predominantly over all industries and the entire world's supply chain of all goods and services to all of us. The control wasn't just about the control of minerals, the control of gold, the control of the financial system. Sure, that was part of it. But at the higher levels, this was actually about being able to feed us pretty much anything they wanted and to pull the plug anytime that they wanted and to ensure that we would not be able to launch our own technologies. This was part of it. And to ensure that we would stay in line. This is another form of global it's one of those days. Global governance. It was heavily tied and intertwined with all parts of government as well. So as you know, at least in America here and predominantly in every other country in the world, there are only two types of corruption in countries. That's civilized corruption and non-civilized corruption. And in this particular case, in America, you could call it somewhat civilized corruption. In other countries that I've been to, some countries in Eastern Europe, Africa, and in some countries in Latin America, it's not so civilized corruption. Meaning here, pretty much for a fee, you can go visit the President of the United States, and for another fee, you can get any law you want passed that will allow your widget to be produced, whether it was good or bad for us and for the environment. This little system of concierge service for those that have lots of money exists because of the non-compete plan. The non-compete plan pretty much is designed around the fact that only bloodline families can own large corporations, become global corporations, take advantage of World Bank programs and economic zones and rebuilding after World War II. All of these types of programs were gifted to the elite. This is where companies like Pfizer were born, and there's pretty much all of Big Pharma, but also things like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and all of the other companies that service the military industrial complex and the like. pretty much if it's anything to do with finance, media, politics, all the lobbyist groups are also a part of this. All of the major groups behind the lobbyist groups, such as PETA and those environmental protection agency groups, Greenpeace, all of those are part of the equation here, and they're all owned and run by these people. Also, things like your healthcare system are also based. Insurance companies, hospitals, large hospital chains, all of it is part of the global control system that became a part of what we call the non-compete plan. And I'm saying this for a good reason, because this is actually where the world is at in the hierarchy, would be these people. But in addition to that, this is what is causing the instability in what you say are global markets. You could say stock markets, but you could also say global supply chains and cost increases in things like oil and gas at the pump and that type of thing at this time, which is also affecting travel and airlines and other things that we as people enjoy using. Airlines are also owned by them. All of these different companies are owned by those people. Now, if you create a company underneath the non-compete plan that had been in force for quite a long time, and you create a new widget, say it's a better cell phone than Samsung or Apple, and it is something that could shake the market. Yours is cheaper, it is faster, it is better, it is easier to use. Let's just say as an example. So you will be approached by Samsung or Apple in this particular case, and you will be told that you are going to sell them your technology. They will kindly offer it to you for a fee. This is how it worked in the past. Nowadays, they'll offer it to you for, you are to sell them the technology for a fee. However, they never pay you. But you're selling them the technology, and then they will then produce it, and you'll have no say over it from that point on. Or they will bury the technology so only theirs can be utilized. The same thing goes for things like mining rights. If you happen to discover, quote unquote, discover, not like anything has yet to be discovered, but if you discovered an area of the world where there are rare earth minerals, you would not be allowed to mine that. They would ensure that you couldn't get any kind of permits. And in some cases, if you are really disrupting things like, for example, the healthcare system, and you don't comply with the rules of the road, meaning all your stuff must be approved by the CDC, FDA, World Health Organization, and all these other groups that they put in place to regulate you. It's not regulatory bodies for them by any stretch of the imagination. Then since these things are there to regulate you, you would not be able to go into clinical trials to test your potential cure for this or treatment for that. So this is all the non-compete plan. All corporate funding would predominantly go to these groups, and on down in the downline, this would extend then to you because you were part of their upline. So for each group that you join, even though it's not something you intentionally or fully understood, for each company that you purchase things from on the regular or participate in, like the healthcare system, you then become a part of that downline, which then gives them the right to rule over you, at least in part. It's another form of global governance. It's another form of where do you fit in their world or their artificial reality. There was an enormous amount of support for the non-compete plan from the higher ups. Although the plan was originally written in 1948 and reevaluated in 1975, to include additional types of technologies and their potential release that came from groups like the Majestic 12, and who would be privileged enough to release them. You know, these people don't actually create anything, including people like Elon Musk, even though he says he does. He doesn't. He gets technologies passed down because he's part of the science division of the Noncompete plan. So, as it relates to the Noncompete plan, yes, it was revised in 1975, and finally that's when it started to come into play. If you were around in 1975 and you watched any kind of TV, there were television shows like Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. There were lots of advertisements on TV that were geared around, if you're not wearing these pants, then you're not a person. Or if you don't drink this alcohol or smoke these cigarettes, or, you know, these were all commercials back in the day. Sorry, millennials listening to this. But these were all allowed commercials back in the day that would tell you, you know, this is the way you should be living your life, and these are things you should aspire to own this yacht, like the people on Dynasty, as an example. So we all kind of knew, I mean, even as young kids, what these things were intended to do, because it portrays to you how you want to be portrayed by other people. You know, we're all competing or keeping up with the Joneses, and it took the program that had started in the 40s and really escalated it by 1975. It was also tweaked for additional technologies that they were told that would be released in the future, such as cellular devices, time travel, possible things for medical innovation, ways of keeping people on the pharmaceutical hook. Like if you have high blood pressure, we're going to give you high blood pressure by putting this in your food and then stressing you out so that you have to work all of these hours. And then we're going to give you something that you have to take every day for the rest of your life. And that is what I mean by keeping you on the hook and keeping you within their global governance circle. So as they go into panic mode and protection mode, a lot of these elite that are left, whatever's left of these people, they're trying to kind of reinforce this plan, shore it up, and they continue to try to drive old revenue streams that have worked in the past. Nowadays, though, they're just not working, and they're getting angry and they're getting frustrated. Normally, they would implement these revenue streams, because this is part of what you're seeing in the news these days, too. Normally, they would implement these revenue streams. Big money would come out to fund said revenue streams, and then they would be able to then get more money from you, and you would then be in their downline or under their care. You are the shampoo provider, or you are the vaccine provider or the pharmaceutical provider for Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Therefore, you must receive money each year to care for Mr. and Mrs. Jones' needs, because they have now come to you indirectly and said, I would like this, I need this, even though somebody in a white coat told you you needed it, like a doctor, or some guy told you that your car's not repairable and you need another car, which also are all manufactured by them. It doesn't matter how you got there. This is some form, in their mind, of implied consent. Now, reinforcing these revenue streams in their mind allows them to continue to exist, because they are what they call themselves the worthy. They are the ones that are worthy to receive. Now, in an inverted world, that may have been true. If we are not in an inverted world, and then we are in a world that is controlled, I hate to say controlled because that's not a good word to use. I would say that is created by and co-created by yourself and source, then we don't really need any of this. And they are considered enemies of Source. They've chosen that side.
One of the bigger downlines would be pharmaceutical companies. So as Kim was talking about, they're starting to freak out. They are pulling out all their old stops, trying to make sense. Why isn't this working? Now you know why. There is a huge uptick in all these diseases that the mainstream media says we're going to die from, right? We're going to die from Ebola. Oh, there's a tick outbreak. Oh, there's hantavirus, whatever they're calling this thing from the cruise ship. Why do they always start on cruise ships? Honestly, these people have zero creativity in their bones. But now you understand why all this is coming up. It makes them a lot of money, but this is also part of the rule book. Why isn't the rule book working anymore? Kim mentioned, I don't know if it was in her last report, but she was talking about the destruction of Lucifer. And Lucifer was a shady, you know what? I mean, if you haven't read enough in the religious text to know how bad Lucifer really was, I think we only got like a little snippet of that, and it'll probably, be a while before we fully understand the capability of this monster that is now gone. However, he left us a little gift in the form of databases that were to take over should he not be successful. Okay. So all of these databases were basically continuing to do his work and making a lot of violations. There were a lot of violations happening. And according to Kim, they were counting on this, and they basically were racking up all these violations because at some point it was going to be time for us to cash in based on the rules of war. Well, guess what? It's now time to cash in.
We may not have a Lucy anymore or a Lucifer, but we got Lucifer databases that just don't seem to care about the rules because there's nothing left to lose. And perhaps they were always programmed that way. Basically, they are here to act as his proxy in the event of his non-existence anymore. If he actually lost the war, these machines are supposed to continue on with the war, and then the permissions to use these machines would then get passed on down the line. However, many serious violations have occurred over the last couple of weeks and even over the last year that we have counted on cashing in at some point in time. These violations violated the rules of war, which now allows us on our side only to basically say to the deep state, all is fair in love and war. For us on our side, since they are the ones that broke the rules, it doesn't matter who told them to break the rules. It matters that they made a decision to break them. Were they aware? I don't know. That's not my problem. That is the leader of their organization's problem. And database or otherwise, it allows us to wipe it out past, present, and future. Or, in the case of the deep state, unbeknownst to probably many of the deep state that listen to this call, did you know that they actually attach every single one of these systems, whether they know it, NSA people, or not, to me, to power it over here, because it has no power source anymore. That is not me. They can't connect it directly to you. They're trying. And they've tried. Then they've tried through me to you. They've also tried that as well. But over the course of doing this, Source allowed it to happen. We and he allowed the Durango people to do it. He allowed the NSA people to do it. We allowed all of these people to do it over the last several years now. We allowed it to happen. We didn't open the gate. We didn't do anything we weren't supposed to do. I listened to Source every step of the way because I know he's always got a plan, but I didn't really understand why until now. Because there would come a point in time when Lucifer's authority would be passed back to source, which means that every system that they built based on myself and based on other people would automatically also go away as well. His authority to create, his authority to rule over the kingdom, his authority to be the bringer of the light of source originally, but then his false light eventually. These three things were key for source to take back, which he did yesterday. In turn, because of that, the authorities that all of the deep state had to power anything off my butt also went away. But instead of making it all go away initially, at least as of this moment in time, instead of making it all go away, we just froze it. Why? Because we now have the authorities that their quote-unquote God once had, and in fact, it gave us full authority over every machine and all of their bloodlines. Can you imagine? So at this moment in time, I'm waiting for the word go on where we want to go from here on that note. But we're waiting for the word go as to what we're going to do with all these people, what we're going to do with all their machines. An offer and a shot over the bow was made this morning. Basically, look, give me all your stuff. Don't give me all your stuff. All is fair in love and war. Don't ever forget that. It doesn't matter if we are living in a system of current of love or we're living in a system of current of war. And it doesn't matter if we're in an artificial reality or an artificial kingdom or an artificial world or a natural organic world or even an artificial organic world, because those things exist too. It doesn't matter where we are. The creator of it was always the same guy, being. Now, what if that being's permissions were completely taken away to have those three authorities and given back to source? We were finally at that point earlier today. So the deep state's going to have a really bad day today. Maybe they're not the worthy ones that they told me they were. I have to laugh. So for all of you that are questioning whether source is around, it's really hard sometimes to have the faith that he's always going to be there, that he's always going to come through for you, and that there is a plan, even when you're tired and you're tired of fighting and you're tired of seeing people hurt and in pain and people and children die of diseases that should never exist. Trust that he has a plan. He made promises to you. He's made promises to me. And he will follow through on those promises.
So here's another example of how the deep state is failing miserably. Have you guys ever heard of the Majestic 12? If you did a search for it online, you'd probably find some information. It probably won't be accurate, but there is information out there about this group. So Kim has talked about the Majestic 12 before, but we have some more information that we want to give you. And Kim will explain a little bit more about who this group is. But what's more interesting is how they are no longer able to help the deep state in a way that they have in the past. Do you ever wonder, like, especially when it came to technology, like, how did they really get this technology? You know, we know that it wasn't Bill Gates, you know, just in his garage and he just came up with a computer, right? I mean, these stories are meant to, like, razzle and dazzle us, but there's no truth behind any of this. All of this technology is passed down and it's given to the people that serve the dark side. That's just the world that we lived in for a very long time. Now, all that's changing, but that is the world we were born into. And you can thank the Majestic 12, at least from the tech side, of giving these technologies out and giving them to the wrong side, what I would call the wrong side. But let's learn a little bit more about how the Majestic 12 just isn't that majestic anymore.
One of the other things that popped up that I thought you might find very interesting that I wanted to share with you as well is information about the Majestic 12. And if you've been around in the alternative media for any length of time, you've heard many, many people talk about the Majestic 12. I've even talked about the Majestic 12. And my understanding of the Majestic 12 was they were a group that worked higher above, which they did, this part's true, of the CIA. They are also a distributor of technologies. And at the time, they told everybody, especially people on the internet, that they talk to aliens and they get advanced technologies and then they pass those technologies on to the elite, and then the elite create companies around these technologies based on a program of when they can actually release that technology. Now, sometimes those technologies are never exposed to the public. Things like med beds for the elite or black ops programs, technologies, and things that we consider UFOs and other technologies of this nature that the Majestic 12 would actually receive. Now, there's a very interesting part about the Majestic 12 that we didn't find out about until the last few days, because they too were also called upon to see if they could pull technologies in here like they used to, because they need some technology. You know, that's what the elite would like. They would like some technology because apparently these military people that are left think they're still fighting a war. Okay. So they still believe that they're fighting a war. So they need some technologies to fight with because all their stuff's going away. Now, if we were actually actively engaging them in war and not out of quote unquote love, they wouldn't be here at this time. Basically, what we're doing is we're trying to cause the least amount of disruption, keep asking them if they're ready to come work for us now. Clearly, they're not. They believe that they are more worthy than we are. Of course, who am I? You know, I'm nobody, except I powered all their systems and they connected all their systems to my butt. But maybe these people don't know that. So anyway, if we were fighting a real war, not out of love for creation, they wouldn't be here. So back to the Majestic 12. So the Majestic 12 did fail in their quest to do what's called opening a vault. And the Majestic 12 actually live in creation too, much like the frog people. So in creation, they actually look like some kind of a cross between Einstein, you know, with the crazy hair, and maybe those like 1990s or 80s or whatever they were, troll dolls. Remember, we would kind of spin them around in their hands and their hair would go all over the place. That's what they kind of look like. So that's what they look like on the creation side of things. And on the other side over here, they just look like regular people. So they had utilized a system we call the vault system. And matter of fact, the deep state also calls it the vault system. The vault system is a place where you could pass things back and forth between the natural world and the not so natural world. And there were loads of quantum tunnels that would connect on both sides to these vault systems, and they could be passed back and forth. And the Majestic 12 was one of the groups that was able to utilize said system in the past. But remember, 2 keys to get in, 3 keys to get out. So the Majestic 12 appears in many timelines and many alternative realities. And on the flip side, they're the Troll Einstein people. We'll call them Troll Einstein people. So in this particular case, the ones that are in the alternative reality can put their DNA in on the one side, and on the other side, the troll Einstein guy, which is themselves, would put in their DNA, and it's usually done through a very strange gel-like glowing blue gel that they put their hand into, which actually reads the DNA on both sides. And those make up the two keys to unlock the vault doors, and the technology can be passed back and forth. Now, to avoid contamination, entropy, and annihilation from the same being touching itself from 2 points in quote-unquote time and through an inversion, these doors, vault doors, looked kind of like, okay, I'm going to say it anyway because it's the only thing that comes to my mind. If you've ever gone to a hospital or an emergency room or a doctor's office and you've ever had to give a quote-unquote deposit of any sort into a cup to have a test run on said deposit, they would often send you to the bathroom with this whole little protocol you had to follow, and then you would put your cup and said deposit that is in the cup into you would open a little door in the bathroom, and you would put the cup inside and you would shut the door, and then someone on the other side would actually open the door and take out your cup and the deposit and run the laboratory tests. So if you've ever seen something like this occur, this is how the vault system actually worked. You could put things into the vault. They would shut the door on the other side, key it in with their DNA, and the same matching Majestic 12 crazy Einstein person on the other side would then be able to open the door with the matching DNA on the other side and then open the door. Never the two shall actually meet for those particular reasons. So the Majestic 12 was one of many different groups in the hierarchical system, because there's 12 of them. 12 Illuminati, 12 Black Nobility, 12, there was always 12 of them. So they would together would be part of what you would call the elite system of passing things back and forth, again, compartmentalized and only in charge of sending and receiving technologies from creation to here for use in any artificial reality in the past. When I say here, I use the word here cautiously because that's changing very rapidly. So this was how the Majestic 12 actually functioned. So they tried doing this all weekend, except did the door open on both sides? Well, yeah, and they could actually see the cool stuff in the middle, but they couldn't actually take it out. They couldn't get at it from either side. Shame, really. The same thing used to happen with gold. The same thing used to happen with all kinds of things in the past. You often hear about Chinese elder vaults. Here they are. They work in the same way. So unfortunately, without the third key, the door doesn't really actually open in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't matter if you are one of the Chinese elite or one of the Israeli elite, and I'm saying this for a very particular reason, and you have one of the highest levels in the hierarchy of humans on the planet, obviously not the highest, but on that type of level, human-wise, and you needed to send and receive things to yourself from one side to the other, you were only two of the keys, and you would still need a third key, and therefore, if this was not a permitted action, you would have never gotten it. The same thing actually works when passing money from creation over to here. or in any other artificial reality system in the past, you would have to have all three keys to get it out. So you have to actually match yourself on both sides. Unfortunately, you also have to be the third key holder, which is of the vault system, which, yeah, that person, or that being, I should say, is not willing to participate in helping them gain anything back and forth anymore from creation. So therefore, even I can't help them anymore, and nor would I want to in any way, shape, or form. But nonetheless, passing things back and forth through these magical vault systems requires a very specific DNA. And I know if you've been around in the circles long enough, you've probably heard this type of special DNA requirement from people like Neil Keenan and other people that have talked about the vault system. Now, the vault system also had transportation systems that could go back and forth through time in the past, through the past, present, and future in any particular artificial reality. There were only certain particular groups that could drive on ride, I should say, on the time train, so to speak. There was data passed through and information passed through. The rails were written on light systems, the light rail system. Is there someone that talked about the light system? Maybe on the internet you've heard of before, wink, wink. The light system is actually a Lucifer system in this particular case, because the light system ran on his light, not the light of source. And just because someone says something is light doesn't necessarily mean it is a good thing. Most of the worlds of the elite, their computer systems, were all written also based on these rails, including your financial transfer systems were also written on these rails of the artificial Luciferian light system. So now we understand vaults, and the Chinese elders are opening the vaults, and allegedly they're going to give it to Neil Keenan or whoever is next on the Chinese elder train. Why do I know the deep state isn't opening vaults? This is why I know they're never going to open vaults. This is why I know they're never going to get any gold out of North Korea. This is why when they're still hanging around in the Philippines, I know they're never going to be able to open that door. It doesn't matter if they are the elders or the non-elders or whoever. There's already basically a choice by the elite, by the militaries, by all the people on their side, that they would not like to work with Source. They would not like to work for us. They would not like to participate. Therefore, they now have, and have not had for a long time now, access to any vault anywhere for any reason, including the stuff in Fort Knox everybody keeps talking about, the stuff that was in Germany, all the places in Russia. Never, ever, ever will they be able to access any of this stuff ever again because, hey, we're not friends, right, guys? You want to choose to go it alone, layer after layer until you all die and all your companies die and everything falls down with you. That is totally fine with us. We're going to move on over here. See, because they're not their vaults anymore, they're ours. It'll be easier to pass things back and forth. It is a good thing. Most of the worlds of the elite, their computer systems, were all written also based on these rails, including your financial transfer systems were also written on these rails of the artificial Luciferian light system. So now we understand vaults, and the Chinese elders are opening the vaults, and allegedly they're going to give it to Neil Keenan or whoever is next on the Chinese elder train. Why do I know the deep state isn't opening vaults? This is why I know they're never going to open vaults. This is why I know they're never going to get any gold out of North Korea. This is why when they're still hanging around in the Philippines, I know they're never going to be able to open that door. It doesn't matter if they are the elders or the non-elders or whoever. whoever, there's already basically a choice by the elite, by the militaries, by all the people on their side, that they would not like to work with Source. They would not like to work for us. They would not like to participate. Therefore, they now have, and have not had for a long time now, access to any vault anywhere for any reason, including the stuff in Fort Knox everybody keeps talking about, the stuff that was in Germany, all the places in Russia. Never, ever, ever will they be able to access any of this stuff ever again because, hey, we're not friends, right, guys? You want to choose to go it alone, layer after layer until you all die and all your companies die and everything falls down with you. That is totally fine with us. We're going to move on over here. See, because they're not their vaults anymore, they're ours. It'll be easier to pass things back and forth.
You know, it kind of feels like we're playing this game of chess, right? Either you're on the good side or you're on the bad side, the light side, the dark side. And man, we just keep knocking all these chess pieces off their board. You know, pretty soon they're not going to have any more chess pieces. And it's interesting because they have still remained very cocky. In fact, Kim was talking about how they said, oh, the meek, you've heard the term, the meek shall inherit the earth. Well, they keep, coming to us being like, you ready to give in? You ready to give in? And Kim's like, are you ready to give in? And they're like, oh, the meek is going to suffer. And that's not what's happening at all. I mean, I don't know if they really believe this or, because they never lose. Like they've never lost before. Everything's always been handed to them. But the phrase is the meek shall inherit the earth. It's not the nasty deep state shall inherit the earth. And we're making a lot of progress. And so I wanted to end on this positive note where Kim talks a little bit more about there being a plan moving forward, the restoration plan, and how this is coming up really quick.
The meek shall inherit the earth. No longer are we the meek once you have inherited the earth. The trials and tribulations, as difficult as it has been, and the energy being up and down, and you feel like we're going somewhere great, and then the next day you get knocked down a little bit, those days are coming to an end. We are preparing to move forward with care. We have a contingency plan, whether they exist or they don't exist. We have a plan and a way forward in detail on how we can all go forward now, and there is nothing that they can actually do about it, even though we're using what used to be considered one of their banks. It's not their banks anymore because the authority doesn't belong to them. And in closing, one more thing for you to think about is, where did money actually even come from? How is debt incurred in an inverted system? And what happens when that debt is called, fully called? And who owns what if someone, not them and not their boss, owns all the money and the authority to actually bring it into creation? It's a huge game changer for you, and it's a huge game changer for us, and we can turn it into whatever we want at this stage in the game. All we need to do is finish it off. So we have a few days left of transition period, I hope. Boy, do I hope more than even you. And hopefully by the next report, I'll have even better news. I was hoping to get that news before I did this report, but I know everybody wants to know what's really going on, and I apologize. It's just been kind of a crazy time here too. But hopefully with the next report, we'll have some even better news for you.
And we're all looking forward to that, right? All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for another episode of The Rundown. If you want more information about United Network news and perhaps, learn a little bit more about how you can become a member, that way you can get all of Kim's reports the moment they come out, all of our news reports, anything we publish, you can visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.